The country Liberals have pre-selected the Deputy Mayor of Palmerston to stand against Labor's Damian Hale at the next election. Public servant and mother of one, Natasha Griggs, says she hopes to shake Damian Hale out of the seat of Solomon, which he's held since 2007.
Through my work on council, I'm mixing with people and business and the community, so I think that I'll be able to represent their views in Canberra. Because at the moment, let's face it, Solomon is not on the radar in Canberra.
But the CLP still hasn't decided who'll take on Warren Snowden for the Bush seat of Lingiari or a second Senate candidate. Liberal Senator Nigel Scullion says he's honoured to be pre-selected unopposed.
The top end of the territory has become a magnet for high-profile politicians as the federal election gathers pace. The reason? Well, the Darwin-based seat of Solomon is one of the most marginal in the country and has traditionally gone to the party that wins government. Michael Coggan reports.
It's showtime in the federal seat of Solomon. Young families make up a majority in this urban-based electorate, and they're stretching their budgets to treat their kids to a day in the sun.
Like 5 chances for $2 over this way here today.
It's a spruiker's paradise and fertile ground for candidates contesting one of the most marginal seats in the country. What's the main issue for you in the federal election?
For me, I think would be the boat people. And I'd like to see honest politicians. I don't know if any of us believe that the politicians are really honest.
They're both the same. I wouldn't vote for any of them.
I'm very concerned about the way they're dealing with the asylum seekers. I feel that they're being treated very unfairly. I'm also worried about climate change.
Education's fine. There's probably, I'd say, housing and freight.
The electorate of Solomon's an unusual electorate. It has a very low enrolment compared to other electorates in the country. As a Darwin-based electorate, it has a high transient population. People move in and out of the electorate, often being members of the public service or the defence service.
Solomon has been described as a bellwether seat because it's followed government since its inception in 2001. But election analyst Anthony Green says local issues have the potential to swing the seat away from government.
It's got a very relatively young population compared to the rest of the country, and being so far away from the rest of the country, it's got a lot of local issues that run in the local media and that spread by word of mouth. Local issues can be much more important in Solomon than in other electorates.
The seat was won by Labor for the first time in 2007. Preferences delivered Damian Hale a 200-vote winning margin.
At the moment, we're 1,000 votes in front.
The former St Mary's and Northern Territory Institute of Sport football coach is campaigning on delivering on health and education and the economy, but his first term has been marked by personal problems.
He got involved in a nightclub fight, there was a problem with his marriage, and these are the sorts of things that might also influence voters, although I don't believe that a large number of voters will be taking much notice of those issues.
The Country Liberals candidate Natasha Griggs has cut her political teeth on the Palmerston City Council. So far, the public servant has focused her campaign on housing affordability.
Quite frankly, we don't want these houses removed. We want to save a suburb.
But emergency housing providers say neither party is offering to increase the current per capita rate of federal funding to ease high rates of homelessness.
We have the highest rate of homelessness in the country, and we'd like to see a fair share of that money coming to the territory rather than a per capita level of funding. And we'd like to also see a continuation and a commitment from both levels, both of the opposition and the current government, to maintain a rental affordability incentive scheme.
The biggest issue facing business in the Northern Territory, and particularly in the top end, is still the cost of, or the availability of land and the cost of housing.
The Territory Chamber of Commerce says local businesses finding it difficult to recruit enough staff want the government to make it easier to use 457 visas to employ foreign workers.
We have a requirement for those sorts of people. We're not doing anybody out of a job, but we quite seriously need to be able to get access to the skilled migration pool.
Just for new politicians, if they're learning the trade, always shake the fence, all right? First.
Damian Hale has the benefit of incumbency, but when the election was called, betting agency Sportsbet put the Labor candidate marginally behind the Country Liberals' Natasha Griggs. By midweek, they were level pegging.
All sorts of things can make a difference, and that's one of the reasons, of course, why leading politicians of both sides are going to be visiting Solomon, I think, fairly frequently over the next few weeks.
Natasha Griggs has stepped into a new world of political competition in an attempt to make the switch from local to federal politics.
The Prime Minister has pledged to help build 1,200 new houses in Darwin and Palmerston if Labor gets re-elected. The move is designed to torpedo the Country Liberals campaign to win the Territory's most marginal seat. But the opposition says it can top that number.
Far from closed-in shoes, even at a Northern Territory building site, the Prime Minister was welcomed with some very Territory attire.
I'll be keeping those, thank you very much. That's lovely of you.
Thanks, I'll take all the props.
No.
Yeah, sure.
And she had something for Territorians.
I announced that a re-elected Gillard government will deliver, through our National Rental Affordability Scheme, 1,200 new residences in Darwin.
The Territory is in the grip of an affordable housing crisis. The average weekly rental price in Darwin is $550 a week. The 1,200 houses will be for low to middle income earners and rented out for at least 20% below market rates.
This is really needed, and it's needed for working families and for people who are working but just cannot make it in the private rental market at the moment.
The election pledge is designed to fire a massive hole in the Country Liberals campaign to win the seat of Solomon. Their candidate, Natasha Griggs, has promised to excise Defence Force land here, which has 400 houses on it, and turn it over to the public. She's responded to the latest development by saying if the coalition wins government, it'll fulfil both promises.
In effect, if a coalition government is in place on the 21st of August and there is a contract for these 1,200 houses, under a coalition government you would actually get nearly 1,600 houses.
The Australian Education Union says Labor's plan to reward schools with high attendance rates won't work in the Northern Territory. And the union's also criticised a scheme to penalise truants by excluding them from sports.
The Federal Coalition's deputy leader came to Darwin today, promising $1 million to get rid of cane toads, but got rather attached to her subject.
Close your eyes now. Sleep time.
Ms Bishop did try to bust Labor's plan to give schools with improved performance and attendance extra money in a results-poor territory.
There's no point in rewarding schools that are already doing well in literacy and numeracy, because that just punishes schools that have significant challenges.
The Education Union agrees and also criticised the government's plan to cut sport for truant children, saying it would create trouble in remote communities.
It's not a good look for the teachers who are trying to bring and attract the kids to school in a positive light, not a negative.
Labor's member for Solomon is still basking in positive light from his plan to subsidise 1,200 affordable rental properties, even though it didn't work before.
The rental affordability scheme that we put forward, we didn't have any takers. All right. What we have now is we have a builder in place, we've got a project manager in place, we're working with the Northern Territory Government to identify parcels of land.
The Country Liberals have promised to adopt Labor's housing plan, but today Damian Hale wouldn't match their promise of a $3 million cancer scanner for Darwin's oncology centre. The coalition obviously believes such announcements could win at Solomon. As for the Territory's other seat...
Do you know who the CLP candidate is for Lingiari?
Yes, I'm just about to tell you.
It seems Lingiari isn't on the coalition's radar. Jane Barton, ABC News.
Sunday may be a day of rest, but not if you're on the campaign trail. The Federal Treasurer Wayne Swan jetted into Darwin today to bolster support for Labor's candidate Damian Hale. He didn't dip into his money bag or promise any new projects, instead referred to Labor's pipeline of investment in the top end.
On a day like this, who wouldn't want to come to the top end, especially when the local member holds the seat of Solomon by a very slim margin?
I don't think there's a local member right around this country who has secured more for their local community than Damian Hale has secured.
Mr Hale's hoping his popularity will soar on the back of high-profile visits like this, but local voters are still swinging.
So stuffed up with what they did to Rudd.
You hear so much at the moment and it's trying to absorb what they're actually talking about.
I'm not going to vote for any of them. None of them are worth voting for.
Locals told Wayne Swan what they thought about issues including asylum seekers and an emissions trading scheme.
We'll give you some suggestion about the ETS.
OK, all right. School was out, but the treasurer's in the classroom, learning about work done at this Darwin school under the stimulus plan. Damian Hale says it's delivered good value for money.
Absolutely, 100%. And you only have to... I've got a pile of third-party endorsements from principals that I collected during the year.
What we are proposing to do is to give the money directly to the principals and the school councils so that they can negotiate really good deals.
Wayne Swan's announced no new projects for Solomon, instead outlining everything that's been spent in the last 3 years and what's still to come.
There's the NBN, there is stage 3, there is the $50 million which is yet to be spent at the port. There is a whole series of investments that are in roads, and there will be more to come as we go forward working with this local community.
He's coined a metaphor to make it clear in voters' minds.
A pipeline of investment, and what I've just outlined to you is a pipeline of activity, long-term investment, which is flowing down a pipeline now.
Is the Canberra Comedy Club in town? Because the people of Solomon are saying that Mr Hale is Mr Invisible and hasn't been seen since 2007.
The Country Liberals' Natasha Griggs is running a campaign focused on law and order and housing affordability. David Cody, ABC News.
The Prime Minister may claim to have thrown out the election rule book, but in the Northern Territory, the campaign is running to a carefully scripted plan. The only problem is not everyone's on the same page.
For the Greens, it's time for more Bob Brown. Some lines that could have been better rehearsed.
You won't get it from the Labor Party and you won't get it from the LCP.
And some better delivered.
Hearing checks and assistance to people with early hearing loss to prevent that, territory rights, opposition to the nuclear waste dump. These are options that we're offering.
But while the Greens leader drew his own crowd, Labor's Warren Snowden had organised one ready-made. Reminding voters of the school buildings Labor hopes will move the country forward.
Building Education Revolution, around $130 million across the Northern Territory, across Lingiari.
The Country Liberals trod the boards of morning radio, but were unable to talk about key policies.
I've got an announcement next week. I'm not going to preempt what the announcement is.
Labor's already announced money for BMX. Today the Country Liberals did too. So is it ripping from Labor's script?
No, not at all. It's just that we have a series of when our announcements are going to be announced, and unfortunately or fortunately, ours was due today.
Sometimes in politics, timing is everything. Katrina Bolton, ABC News.
In the election race, the odds have shifted in the Territory's marginal seat of Solomon. The parties are neck and neck. The country Liberals are claiming underdog status, while Labor thinks it can win.
With thousands of voters heading to the Darwin Cup, the politicians battling for Solomon raced there too, hoping that come election day they'll be a winner.
Number 6, 5 each way, cheap and nasty.
Labor's candidate Damian Hale was feeling lucky.
Backed a winner earlier on, so that's always good to get one up.
And some of the punters were backing him, or at least his boss.
The big race, I'm going to have to go with the Ranger.
But betting agencies say nationwide people are increasingly putting their money on the coalition, although in Solomon people can't decide.
We have taken quite a number of bets on Solomon, but really it has been half and half for Labor and for the Country Liberals.
The bookies are predicting an incredibly tight race. Two agencies have now got the parties neck and neck. Another has Labor ahead by a nose.
If we work really hard in the next 3 weeks, I'm sure that we can win. You know, it's about winning, and elections, there's no second prize.
And when it comes to voting, the race has already started. People began casting their ballots at pre-polling stations in Darwin and Alice Springs today. The opposition had their spruikers there, convinced that in this race, every vote matters. Katrina Bolton, ABC News.
And the country Liberals are divided over a decision made to keep their candidate for the seat of Lingiari, despite the fact that he had breached a domestic violence order. But much of the focus has been on the significantly smaller seat of Solomon in Darwin, which is held by Labor by 0.2%.
Welcome to the seat of Solomon, where tourism, mining, defence and fishing typify the Darwin lifestyle.
My name's John Carney. I'm with the One Nation Party, and
Yes, One Nation still exists up here.
And one stupid issue that was brought up by the Greens, which was putting a blanket ban on all recreational fishing here in the Territory. I mean, that's just... they need to be taken out back and flogged.
The Greens say his facts are wrong.
That is not the Greens' proposal. The Greens' proposal is for marine parks or marine zones in which 30% of Australia's coastline is actually named a marine park.
Fishing may seem an unlikely topic for a federal election, but up here it's the water cooler conversation.
1 in 4 Territorians own a boat. That's about 1 in 3 when you get to Darwin. The fishing vote's pretty much the most crucial one.
Equally crucial is the issue of affordable housing. With Darwin's large defence vote, both parties are focusing on the future of 395 RAF-based houses, some which are empty. Liberal candidate Natasha Griggs says the coalition government will return them to the market.
The suburb will be saved, the houses will be saved, the school will be saved and the businesses will be saved.
Labor's Damian Hale won Solomon by 196 votes. The former footy coach is promising to build 1,200 houses over 3 years.
The difference between us and them is we have a housing minister, we're investing in housing, and for 12 years they did nothing.
Housing affordability might be one of the major issues in the seat of Solomon, but in the neighbouring electorate of Lingiari, it's a different story. Under the intervention, some Indigenous communities are still waiting for their homes to be built. At this town camp, they're looking for 7 new houses.
They've got tarps for the wall to keep the weather out. They still have to pay rent.
Critics say between this and the intervention, the waters have been muddied.
If you ask me, the intervention has sort of frozen there a little bit. And, you know, there's a lot of confusion in every area. Even the police doesn't even know what their job is.
The local newspaper is noted for its colourful front-page headlines, but journalists here agree the intervention is now a grey area.
Even in the newsroom, we're trying to figure out what's the situation with permits. What is it these days?
Warren Snowden holds the safe Labor seat of Lingiari. Contesting is Indigenous country Liberal Leo Abbott. Some Liberals were calling for Mr Abbott to be disendorsed after he was found to have breached a domestic violence order. But party heavyweights decided to keep him as a candidate. Running for the Greens, Barbara Shaw has admitted she's living on welfare through the Basics card. Under the intervention, it forces recipients to spend their money on food and other essentials. Back in Solomon, the opinion polls have been up and down, but if you want a real Territorian analysis, ask the boys at Mango Motors. Ryan Richards is an expert at selling the unsellable. He says Julia Gillard is like this red Toyota Echo.
They just don't hold value anymore. That just explains Gillard to me.
For Tony Abbott, this Ford Fairlane isn't all as it seems.
Looks beautiful from the outside, drives nice, but it's only got the V6. Most expect the V8.
And what of the former Prime Minister?
We're all mangoes around here, except for the Rudd car. That's a lemon.
Voting in remote parts of the Territory has already begun. Peter Jane Madam, World News Australia.
The final days of the election campaign in the Northern Territory have been focused on the way the Country Liberal Party has argued whether one of their candidates should be disendorsed. It's been revealed the CLP candidate for Lingiari, Leo Abbott, was placed on a good behaviour bond last year after breaching a domestic violence order. A decision by the party hierarchy to continue to endorse Mr Abbott goes against the wishes of the Territory opposition leader, and he's called for a revision of the way the CLP handles pre-selection. Michael Coggan reports.
People will be looking very closely, I think, at how it's been played out. There just is background noise of domestic violence, and you've got two people in opposing parties and two electorates, neighbouring electorates, who are involved in a DVO situation.
Well, sadly, it's politics standard. I mean, it is dirty politics, but dirty politics has for quite some time now been politics standard.
The federal seat of Lingiari has been held by Labor's Warren Snowden since it was first contested in 2001. Campaigning in the safe Labor seat is often overshadowed by the marginal Darwin-based seat of Solomon. But a dispute within the Country Liberal Party over whether to disendorse their Lingiari candidate because of a breach of a domestic violence order has become the focus of coverage in the last days before the poll.
There's a problem here. There's a real problem here with the credibility of the CLP and indeed of Tony Abbott and their ability to determine who will stand for them and run for the federal parliament.
It all came about as an anonymous attack on the CLP candidate, using, in fact, this rather unfortunate record that he appears to have, and I say appears advisedly, for a domestic violence issue and then a breaching of that domestic violence order against his partner.
The Country Liberal Party candidate Leo Abbott is campaigning against Warren Snowden in Lingiari. Mr Abbott says members of the CLP knew about the breach of the domestic violence order.
I'm not quite sure that everybody knew about it, because I'm talking about the whole party. We're talking about everybody that's a member of the Country Liberals. There was no violence, there was no force on my ex-partner whatsoever.
When the federal opposition heard about the DVO, they called for disendorsement.
Tony Abbott disagrees with the decision and abhors domestic violence, as does Terry Mills, the leader of the CLP.
Don't they have any authority in this matter?
Well, they put their view, but with pre-selections with the CLP, it is a local matter.
So should people not vote for him?
People will make their own judgment. He has to now make his case.
We know that the management committee of the CLP has overridden the desire both of Tony Abbott, of the erstwhile Prime Minister, the person who wants to be the Prime Minister, and the Northern Territory Leader of the Opposition, Terry Mills, whose desire it was to dump this candidate because of these breaches and because of his failure to divulge them.
The split within the CLP widened as the week progressed. Territory MLA Jodine Carney says health reasons and the argument over Leo Abbott's party endorsement contributed to her decision to quit politics next month. Facing a by-election, Territory Opposition Leader Terry Mills was maintaining a brave face.
My position is solid and I won't be moving. I know when I'm on the right spot and that gives me comfort. I know my colleagues know that I'm on the money.
The fact is that now that it's out there, it may well have a significant effect, I think, on the seat of Solomon. I don't think it's going to have an effect on the seat of Lingiari because, frankly, except in extraordinary circumstances, Warren Snowden was never going to be in danger in that seat.
In the marginal Darwin seat of Solomon, Damian Hale has been forced to revisit the details of a domestic violence order taken out against him by his ex-wife.
The CLP became lazy and complacent.
Former CLP Chief Minister and Liberal Party President Shane Stone has been connected to moves to use the Leo Abbott case to put Damian Hale on the defensive. The Alice Springs News online newspaper quoted an email from Mr Stone about the domestic violence order against Leo Abbott.
If we determine it's correct, then we pull his pre-selection and at the same time challenge the ALP to do likewise with Hale.
They, of course, decided, well, let's bring Mr Hale into the frame because he has similar problems and at the moment he's sliding beneath the radar, and apparently the Chief Minister, Mr Henderson, thinks that he's okay because I think, to quote Mr Henderson in Parliament, it's only the breaching of the DVO that's a bad thing. If you do it once, it's okay. If you do it twice, i.e. breach it, then you've got a problem. Well, that's just not good enough, I'm afraid.
The CLP are trying to muddy the waters for Damian, but they're chalk and cheese. I mean, Damian's issues were dealt with in a very public way when they came to light. He dealt with them publicly, he dealt with them appropriately, he responded to the issues. They are chalk and cheese. There's been no issue to do with violence.
Although most people decry negative campaign tactics, the fact is the reasons why the parties use them is because they work.
If the Labor Party win on the weekend, the broadband's already begun to be rolled out in places like Tasmania.
No one raised the domestic violence order issue at a public forum with the Solomon candidates this week, but it featured heavily in the media and election campaign material.
I condemn any type of family violence, and I have never partaken in it.
I do not support the endorsement of Leo Abbott, and I do not support the decision made from management. I've not let it deviate me from campaigning this week. I've continued to campaign hard.
Leo Abbott has not responded to repeated calls from Stateline. Up to a quarter of Territory voters have already cast their votes, but it could be days or weeks before the results in this part of the country are finalised.
Michael Coggan reporting. It's almost an understatement to say that it's been a dramatic week in politics as the two major parties sit neck and neck in Canberra and the independents continue to negotiate the possibility of one party forming a government. Federal politicking has triggered a leadership spill in the Country Liberal Party. This morning, the former federal member for Solomon, Dave Tollner, challenged Terry Mills for the leadership and lost. We'll hear what the new federal member for Solomon, Natasha Griggs, thinks about it all in a minute. But first, Michael Coggan takes a look at how it all unfolded.
For the past 3 federal elections, voters in Darwin's marginal seat of Solomon have had to wait days for a definitive result. But the swing against the government on Saturday delivered a clear victory for first-time Country Liberals candidate Natasha Griggs.
Oh, look, we are delighted. We had a very good result, certainly in Solomon, where, you know, we had about a 2.5% swing towards the Country Liberals. Natasha Griggs was a good candidate and she fought a very strong campaign.
I know, it's great, isn't it? It's great.
The party faithful were clearly united in celebrating taking the seat of Solomon from Labor's Damian Hale. But behind the scenes, a dramatic result in the previously safe Labor seat of Lingiari is continuing to fuel dissent, triggered by a debate over whether to disendorse the Country Liberals candidate.
The CLP have obviously got some internal problems, and Terry Mills has got to his office. Apparently there is a rift with the Alice Springs members and branches, for that matter, and it's up to Terry Mills to heal that rift very, very quickly.
The remote and rural seat of Lingiari has been held by long-serving Labor MP and Gillard government minister Warren Snowden. But despite a swing towards him in urban areas, the safe seat is now marginal.
Warren Snowden, remarkably, got a swing towards him in just about all of the Territory regional towns. Alice Springs, Katherine, Nhulunbuy, Jabiru and so on. Where he lost, though, was in the mobile polling booths, in the remote communities. The remote Indigenous communities turned against Labor massively. There are 22 remote polling teams. 6 of those actually recorded a vote for the CLP. As far as I can recall, that's unprecedented in my time of observing politics.
Many of the remote polling teams recorded anti-Labor swings of between 20 and 60%. In the urban areas of the electorate, it's possible publicity surrounding domestic violence orders against the Country Liberals candidate Leo Abbott could have contributed to a swing towards Labor.
It certainly does look like in the towns in Lingiari, the domestic violence issue played out very much in Warren Snowden's favour. But conversely, as I say, it may well be that the way the domestic violence issue played out in Solomon rebounded to an extent against Damian Hale in a seat where Labor had a lot more to lose.
I believe there is no option than for me to make a call upon the Country Liberal Management Committee to disendorse Leo Abbott.
Territory opposition leader Terry Mills's call to disendorse Leo Abbott a week out from the election was rejected by the party management, triggering an internal brawl.
Over the last few months,
former party executive member Steve Brown this week sent an email to CLP politicians suggesting Leo Abbott could have won Lingiari if Terry Mills hadn't called for his disendorsement.
Terry's lack of judgment, along with his open attack on his own party, has placed him in a irreconcilable position. Terry Mills cannot possibly continue in the role of leader. He must step down, immediately.
Terry is a fine leader. He's done a fantastic job in the Legislative Assembly and in the broader Northern Territory. There's no question about that. Terry is very popular.
Country Liberals President Rick Setter says comments attributed to Steve Brown in the Alice Springs News newspaper suggesting the party knew Leo Abbott had breached a domestic violence order are false.
I had certain exchanges with Mr Brown and subsequently he stood down as a member of the management committee. And that's where the matter rests.
And why was that?
Well, obviously because of the fact that he breached management confidentiality.
The party has muzzled Steve Brown, but his wife says he has party support.
This was just another blatant slap in the face to anything that's south of the Berrima line. It's put us under a lot of pressure, a lot of pressure. We've had a lot of phone calls, we've had a lot of emails from party members supporting us and saying hang in there. And at the end of the day, we can only do what we believe is the right thing.
You don't see it as an opportunity for you to step forward and put up a voice, do you?
It would be wrong of me to sort of comment in any way on any of this stuff, Michael.
While he refused to comment on leadership ambitions yesterday, CLP MLA Dave Tollner responded to Steve Brown's concerns.
Good morning, Dave Tollner speaking.
By launching a leadership challenge against Terry Mills this morning. Party sources suggest Mr Mills won by 8 votes to 2.
No, it was not a surprise. But what is very encouraging here is that my clear position, specifically around the recent issue of domestic violence, support of the party platform, that my parliamentary team supports my position.
Terry Mills doesn't have the support fully of his parliamentary wing, nor does he obviously have the support of his party. You still have senior members of the CLP calling for him as leader to resign. You've lost the party president, you've lost the party's best parliamentary performer in Jodine Carney, and Terry Mills is terminal.
Not only the RAF-based houses, we've saved...
The Country Liberals' unity will be put to the test next month at the party's annual conference in Alice Springs.
Michael Coggan reporting there. And I caught up with the Country Liberals member-elect for Solomon earlier today. Natasha Griggs, firstly, congratulations on your new role.
Thank you, Letitia. Thank you.
Looking back on the campaign run up to the election, the CLP ran a fairly dirty campaign. A large chunk of the last week was spent reminding Territorians that the Labor candidate, Damian Hale, had a domestic violence order taken out against him. What was your part in that campaign?
Well, let me say that our campaign was actually 8 months worth of door knocking and you know, spending time in the electorate. So it wasn't. Well, I don't think that there was a dirty campaign. There was some focus in the last week of their campaign on domestic violence. Now, very early on in the campaign, the issue of my houses was brought up, and that's sort of when domestic violence was introduced, because my very first, or our first investment property was bought as a result of domestic violence, where my sister, who was a victim of domestic violence, had 2 young children and needed somewhere to stay. So my husband and I were able to provide a...
In terms of the CLP's campaign using Damian Hale and his domestic violence order, though, what do you think you benefited from that?
Oh, well, look, I mean, I wasn't focused on Damian's, you know, personal situation at all. What I had said was that where Terry had raised the issue with Leo Abbott, our candidate, I fully supported Terry in that domestic violence shouldn't be tolerated, and that was based on a personal situation, you know, like I said, with my sister being a victim of domestic violence, and I was very strongly supporting Terry in that case.
Former CLP member Steve Brown has come forward and called for the CLP leader Terry Mills to resign over the campaign. He says that it was Terry Mills' calls for Leo Abbott to be disendorsed, that lost the CLP the seat of Lingiari and lost the coalition the election. Do you think that the coalition could have won the election had the CLP run a cleaner campaign?
Look, there's lots of speculation about, you know, various aspects and seats and that sort of stuff. I think that Mr Brown's got one view and there are other people with other views, but I've been very firm in my view that domestic violence should not be tolerated, and I supported Terry's call for Leo Abbott to be disendorsed.
The country Liberals do appear to be in disarray. We've seen a leadership challenge today. We've seen leaked emails. Would Territorians be right in thinking that the party lacks discipline?
Oh, look, yes, certainly there was a leadership spill today, and I understand that Terry has been returned as the leader and with a majority, so Territorians shouldn't be worried. I mean, I'll be focused on delivering the things that I promised to, that I said I would deliver, and Terry will be focused on delivering things as part of the local issues.
You're facing the prospect of being in opposition. From there, are you going to be able to implement the election promises that you've made?
Well, Letitia, what I will do is, regardless of what side of government, you know, whether I'll be in the opposition or in government, I will work hard to ensure that the promises or the commitments that I made, even though I did make a proviso that the majority of my commitments were based on a coalition government, but that doesn't mean to say that I won't work really hard to get those commitments delivered for Territorians, and I'll work with either side of government, both at a federal level and a state level, to make sure that the potential for the Territory is built upon and that my commitments are delivered.
You've made some big promises though. The sewage plant alone, you're talking about $100 million.
Well, with what I did with that, it was got commitment for the first stage of the project, but it was about having some vision and long-term thinking, and that's what I wanted Territorians to think. It was never going to be a commitment that was going to be delivered in 3 years. It was about getting people to think longer term and beyond a 3-year election term.
The cornerstone of your campaign was housing. In your victory speech, you thank Dave Tollner. You thank him for helping you to save the houses. You say you haven't just saved the houses, but the suburb, the school, businesses at that RAF base.
That's right.
Was that premature?
Not at all, because even though there's been some conjecture and some commentary about whether or not I will be able to save those RAF base houses, I will work tirelessly to make sure that that can happen, and I would give it all I've got. Tony Abbott, if he was to be our Prime Minister, then that commitment is absolutely rock solid, and it's going to be more difficult under a Labor government. But that doesn't mean to say that I won't work hard and try and deliver that commitment.
Do you have a timeline of when you think that could happen?
Well, once we know who the Prime Minister is, I plan to start working on those commitments. I've already been making phone calls to the current shadow ministers and talking to them and you know, reminding them of the commitments and letting them know that I will be working really hard to make sure that we deliver for Territorians.
You're the member of an independent Conservative party. If these issues are so dear to you, would you ever consider joining a government coalition to ensure they're pushed through?
Letitia, what I will do is I've always said that the Territory is my home and that I will fight for issues for the Territory. If there are individual issues that arise that I need to cross the floor,
would you ever think about joining
absolutely.
a government coalition?
If it was going to be for the benefit of the Territory, foremost, I will do what I can to better the Territory. And I mean, I wouldn't want to say that I would do it on every issue, but there may be some issues where I need to cross over, and I certainly would do that for a particular issue if it was important for the Territory.
But on a permanent move, would you think about becoming part of a government coalition?
Look, no one can take my vote for granted, and you know, we're in early stages of decision making. I was elected under a coalition platform, and so at this stage it's with the coalition. But if there are specific issues that I think the Territory's getting a raw deal, well then I would have to consider where my vote would go.
What issues would be big enough?
Well, there are lots of issues, such as Muckaty, but, like I said, we're in very early stages, and I guess I just have to look at every particular issue as it comes to the fore.
Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you.
In the Northern Territory, the country Liberals split political blood, claiming the marginal seat of Solomon back from Labor. Both the Territory senators were returned, but the voters didn't seem impressed with either major party, and preferences of the Greens and Independents were pivotal.
Winners are grinners, and this time it's the country Liberals tasting success.
First day of a very busy life.
A 3.5% swing helped them snatch the bellwether seat of Solomon.
Natasha Griggs, the new member for Solomon.
It is so amazing.
But as Natasha Griggs delighted in an unexpectedly decisive victory, Labor's Damian Hale made the lonely walk to concede, and he blamed a dirty campaign of personal politics.
It was offered up to me on numerous occasions to go the low road, and to our credit, we never did.
But to the few Labor Party faithful who turned up, he admitted there was a reason there was dirt to dish.
There were certainly things over the last 2.5 years that I take responsibility for, wholly and solely, that have probably cost us votes, and let's be honest about it.
Solomon is traditionally a tight race, and this time too it came down to preferences. As the count firmed, it was clear One Nation picked up 3% of the primary vote. The Greens increased to just over 12%. Greens' preferences were crucial. Instead of giving their preferences to Labor, many Green voters gave their preferences to the country Liberals, and that's what got Natasha Griggs over the line. The country Liberals candidate for Lingiari, Leo Abbott, didn't let the brawl over his breaching a domestic violence order dent his hopes for the Bush seat.
To win, of course, just like any other candidate.
But Labor's Warren Snowden was returned despite a 14% swing in primary votes against him, all of which went to the Greens or Independents. And he was still worried.
I don't think Tony Abbott's the man to take us forward.
Have a bit of a rest.
As Labor drowns its sorrows and the country Liberals celebrate, both sides desperately want to know who will lead the country. Katrina Bolton, ABC News.